Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Owen and Paul. This is a video discussing what would happen if Anthony Joshua faced Francis Ngannou. This is obviously in the wake of what happened on Saturday night, where Francis Ngannou knocked down and almost beat Tyson Fury in a split decision defeat. Paul, I know you're a big Anthony Joshua fan. Owen, I know, not saying you're not an Anthony Joshua fan, but yeah, just maybe not as committed as Paul is. We'll just start off things with what happened on Saturday nights, gents. Paul, what did you make of what went down?
Yeah, as you know, I didn't watch the fight live, but from following on Twitter and seeing a lot of highlights, and again, I still haven't watched the fight in full, so I'm not going to sit out and say that it was a robbery or anything because, um, you know, I can't sit and say that when I haven't watched all 30 minutes of action. But the fact that the fight even went 10 rounds and that it is contentious for me is a bit mind-boggling. Like before, I would have thought that Fury could have ended that fight at any point he wanted to, in a similar fashion to what Mayweather did with McGregor. Seeing those comparisons where he kind of played with him, McGregor, for a few rounds, and then ultimately just was like, yeah, okay, I've had enough now. I'll stop him. That's how I saw that fight going. So I was really really surprised. Like my brother was texting me and saying that he was watching it and he told me that Ngannou got a knockdown, and I genuinely thought he was taking the piss. So yeah, I was absolutely shocked, mate. But yeah, here we are in this video now. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, look, a massive kind of shock. I do think if Ngannou had won, he would have been a contender for the biggest shock in the history of sport, not just boxing, to be honest, if you consider what Fury's achieved and what Fury is at the moment and the circumstances in which Ngannou was coming into the ring. Owen, what did you make of it, mate? What's your opinion?
I did watch it live. I was shocked, to be fair. I'd seen a lot of the build up and Ngannou on the pads and Ngannou on the heavy bag. And that for me was, although I did the video with Eliot, I wasn't overly interested in it, but I was intrigued because obviously I do watch MMA and UFC. So after the, like Paul alluded to, where Mayweather essentially just toyed with McGregor, let him land a few punches and stops him whenever he felt like it. I was expecting that, but obviously with heavyweights, anything can happen with one punch. But I was expecting, similarly, Fury to just essentially just dick about for 2 or 3 rounds and then almost like pick pace up, stick it on Ngannou and stop him at will. But clearly that didn't happen. But yeah, I did think it would have been a very easy night's work for Fury pre-fight.
Yeah, moving on to what we're here to talk about. Obviously, I think there were a few months ago, there were rumours that Anthony Joshua was in talks about a fight with Francis Ngannou. Since Saturday night, there's been more talks from Eddie Hearn, from other voices in boxing about potential that fight potentially happening in 2024. There's been a story that's come out today that Malik Scott has said that talks have just have began between Deontay Wilder's team and Francis Ngannou's team about a fight between the two of them. I think there's a good chance we'll see Francis Ngannou in the ring again. Whether that's a Tyson Fury rematch or against someone else, we don't know. Owen, I'll stick with you here. Going back to starting with Joshua now, what are your reflections on the last couple of years of his career? Obviously, we know he kind of became world champion very early, had all of those title defenses. I think some people would say you can't live off that for too long. And the last couple of years, obviously, he's had the fights against Usyk. He's come back and beat Jermaine Franklin, was supposed to fight Dillian White till that fight fell through at the last minute. Fought Robert Helenius, who was a last-minute replacement, and got the stoppage win, his first stoppage win for a little while. What are your thoughts on the last couple of years of Anthony Joshua's career?
Well, I think I've been quite. I don't know. With Joshua, I think with me, I possibly have been quite harsh on him, but I just think at the very top level, I think he's done. I think with Joshua, he's such a big name in the sport, and fair play to him in those aspects. Like that, you could probably argue between him and Fury, they've kept British boxing alive at stages with their massive nights and sort of reignited it in a sense. But I just think at the top level, of heavyweight boxing. I just don't think Joshua's there anymore. I still think it's probably worthwhile in boxing because no matter who he fights, it's going to be worth a lot of money. So from a money aspect, I think he's definitely got a few fights left in him, but I don't see him troubling any top heavyweight. I don't see him being even close to ever being a world champion again. And like I said, I don't want to sound too harsh on him because he has had a good career. He's a British heavyweight. He's become a world champion as an Olympian also. But yeah, I just think for me, AJ's finished at the top level.
Paul, obviously going to go to you now. What's your opinion on the question I asked about Joshua's last couple of years of his career, as well as what Owen said?
Yeah, fair play to Owen for sticking his neck on the line, and some points he makes there are very valid, but I just completely disagree. You look at Joshua and think that, yeah, he's lost 3 times. And if you're talking about recently, if you're talking about those 2 Usyk defeats, the first one, yeah, he was well beaten. He was well beaten. Second time, again, no arguments. He was beaten, but there was a lot of improvement there, in my opinion, in the Usyk rematch. And I know it depends on how how you define the word close, but I think it was a close enough fight. 7-5, Usyk, some maybe have it 8-4, whatever, but I still think it was very competitive. And Joshua showed great improvement. Then since then, I feel like Joshua's been more criticized for his 2 victories since than actually for his defeats. And that's obviously, credit to Alexander Usyk for being the fighter he is, but like I know he's been with Derek James for 2 fights, and everyone's saying about him being gun shy. And perhaps he is, maybe he isn't. He isn't taking as many risks as he was early on in his career. Um, but I just think the criticism that Joshua gets is ridiculous. And I understand people's perception of you're only as good as your last fight, and people are saying that he went life and death with Helenius and it was an even fight until he got the stoppage. Well, if you're only as good as your last fight, then where's Tyson Fury ranked in the heavyweight rankings because he got beat by someone who's never boxed before? In some people's eyes, I'm not saying he obviously did end up getting the win, but like the argument that of late, looking at this last fight, that Joshua is a shadow of his former self, then same can be said against for Fury potentially, who went life and death with Ngannou. The same can maybe be said for Usyk, who a lot of people think got legally dropped by Daniel Dubois. So I just think Joshua gets unfair criticism, and I think he's an easy target in my opinion. It annoys me a little bit.
Owen, just gonna let you respond to that one if you want to.
Yeah, I think personally, the one thing I will agree with on Paul is I've never been a fan of you're only as good as your last fight. I've never looked into that. People have off nights and they can come back and in the rematch finish a fight within 2 or 3 rounds. You're only as good as your last fight. Nothing in it for me. I've never been a fan of it. I just think life and death is probably harsh with Robert Helenius, but Helenius was comfortably in that fight. And I just think Anthony Joshua of 2014, 2015, 2016, I think Anthony Joshua dispatches of Helenius fairly easily and fairly quickly. I think he is gun shy. I think he's scared of what's coming back. I think for me, I know Paul being a massive AJ fan might slightly disagree, but for me, AJ's biggest positive was that when he was throwing 4 or 5 punch combinations, it was with spite. He wasn't afraid of what was coming back because of the power he was putting in his punches, the way he was putting them together, and that's why he got so many knockouts. But I just think he is gun shy. I don't think AJ's a great boxer technically, and we're almost seeing an AJ try and box now. It's not for me at all, and I think there's a lot of heavyweights at the minute, and I mean a lot, that if he tries to box, I don't think it ends well for him.
Okay, gents, in the interest of time, we're going to get to like the main topic here. Paul, we're going to go back to you. I personally think, going to put my neck on the line here, I think that Joshua's going to fight in December or January. And then I do think there's a good chance the Francis Ngannou fight will happen. I think that it means that if he fights Ngannou, it means he's not fighting Wilder in a fight that a lot of people feel like he would lose. Don't really want to discuss the Fury fight, to be honest. We've been talking about it for the last 8-9 years. And I just think it's a big money fight for him. And I think Joshua's admitted himself now it's about money. Mm-hmm. Anti-Josh versus Francis Ngannou. Paul, what do you think happens?
Yeah, I think one of the differences here is that people are saying Fury underprepared and in hindsight was out of shape and maybe didn't take Ngannou seriously. That just would not happen with Joshua. Joshua is a diligent professional, always has been. And that's one thing you have to give him his credit for. Even when he's not in camp and out of shape, he's still got a six pack or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mm.
So like he's one of those he's just one of those people. He's a physical freak. So, you wouldn't get a Joshua out of shape. I feel like he kind of trains basically all year round. So I think you'd have a prepared Joshua. I think that would be a big difference. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, Francis Ngannou's a massive puncher. I'm a big fan of his in the UFC and throughout his MMA career. Huge puncher, yeah. But question marks for me over his stamina, his speed. I know, he kind of countered the odd time and surprised people against Fury, but he's still quite slow. I think cumbersome. I think. I don't think Joshua would knock him out in like 1 or 2 rounds, but I'd be so surprised if that fight went even past 7 rounds. I just think that Joshua has all of the attributes to beat Francis Ngannou. I think Fury did as well and could have done if he had have maybe fought differently. But then at the same time, that's maybe not giving Ngannou his credit. He overperformed. It was probably arguably one of the best boxing debuts people are saying they've ever seen when you're fighting the arguably the best heavyweight in the world. But mate, for me, if for Joshua against Ngannou, I just find it mind-boggling that anyone actually thinks Ngannou could beat Joshua. To be honest with you, two-time world heavyweight champion, fought in 12 consecutive world title fights, winning 9 of them. Only losses, obviously, he avenged that Ruiz loss, which was a shock at the time. He avenged it, and then the only other losses he has in his record are to Usyk. So I just kind of think his record speaks for itself, and it's a bit disrespectful.
Owen, going to give this same question to you. What would your prediction? I think Paul said Joshua inside 7 rounds if he fights Ngannou next year. What would your prediction be and why?
This is what sparked this debate. I genuinely think Ngannou could beat Joshua. This current Joshua, a slight cop out could probably be Joshua 3 or 4 years ago. I think he knocks Ngannou out. But the Joshua of now, who I still think you look at him against Robert Helenius, he didn't go in for the kill early on. He wasn't throwing combinations how he used to throw. So that's against, no disrespect to Robert Helenius, but in terms of heavyweight rankings and world champions, he's 2-bit heavyweight. So if you're not going to do that against him, then what's he going to do when we seen Ngannou legitimately drop Tyson Fury? I think that's out of the fight. I think for me, that's the one thing that isn't being spoken about enough. I noticed by the side of the ear, and obviously that sends your leg scattered, but he caught him, and it was a good punch to drop him with. So I think from what we've seen in the Fury fight, I also want to debunk the Fury being out of shape and not preparing properly. He himself admitted it was the longest camp of his career of 12 weeks. Whether he trained properly during that is another question, but he self-admitted that was his longest training camp. He come in at 277 pound, which I looked at as well, and he come in at 277 pound for the Wilder 3 fight, where he stopped Deontay Wilder. So the people saying, oh, he's got these flabby bits at the side, he looks overweight. He's always looked like that. So for me personally, I think that's discrediting Ngannou's performance by trying to say Fury was out of shape, Fury was this. I think he did underestimate him, but as, in my opinion, the best heavyweight on the planet, he can adapt and he should be able to adapt. Like we've seen Wilder pretty much send him to the shadow realm and then sit up and go on to win the fight. So for me, I think if you take the positives from Ngannou's performance, I'd especially at the prices, AJ would be comfortably favoured, I think. So I'd be backing Ngannou at a fairly hefty price.
Give me your final prediction, Owen. Paul said Joshua inside 7. What would you, if I was to put pressure on you, thinking Ngannou same sort of time, Ngannou points? What would your prediction be?
If the pressure was on, I'd go with points. I don't think Ngannou against, like Paul says, a legitimate ex-world champion. I don't think Ngannou is going to go for the kill. So like when he dropped Fury, he sort of still sat behind the game plan that he had. He didn't get excited. He didn't come diving in. So yeah, if I was to bet on the night, I'd 100% be backing Ngannou points, and I'd be fairly confident based off what we've seen in his debut.
Paul, I can see your face lighting up. So we've got 1 minute left. What's your reaction to Owen saying that Ngannou would outpoint Joshua in 1 minute.
Fair play to him for sticking his neck on the line and picking Ngannou. Do you know what? He wouldn't be alone. I do understand some people would be picking him, but I didn't expect you to say on points. I was going to expect you to maybe say that he would stop him. But the fact, in my opinion, that you're backing an MMA fighter to beat an Olympic gold medalist, two-time world heavyweight champion on points and outbox him, I just cannot see it personally. Like, maybe I do have Joshua tinted glasses on majority of the time, but trying to look at this from a genuinely, neutral perspective, I just cannot see any way in which he can outbox Anthony Joshua. So yeah, fair play to Owen for sticking his neck on the line, but I cannot concur at all.
All right, gents, as always, I hope we see this fight. Then we can find out who's right and who's wrong and talk about it again. Will Anthony Joshua fight Francis Ngannou in 2024? Personally, I think it's a real possibility, and we will see what happens. Paul, Owen, thank you for your time, as always, and I'll speak to both of you again soon.